So welcome to the Future of Schooling. These are our panelists. I'd like to introduce them. Dr. Lawrence Burke, Director of Education for Beacon House School Systems. Prior to taking his role with Beacon House, Dr. Burke taught undergraduate and postgraduate courses in education and liberal studies with the Higher Colleges of Technology, the United Arab Emirates. I'm a little bit out of breath. Mr. Bilal Musharraf is Director of Strategic Partnerships for Edmodo, a global education network that connects all learners with people and resources needed to reach their full potential. Experience both education and financial sectors. Previously, he was the Dean of Translations at Khan Academy and VP Development for an international network of private schools. Ms. Javeria Sethi, at the end over there, is an educationist who has embarked on a mission to make children live a more purposeful life. She is a staunch believer in the potential of young children and is trying to develop 21st century learning spaces which harness the natural pathway of human development and are conducive to intellectual, emotional, and social growth of students. Mr. Saad Hamid. Saad Hamid is a technology entrepreneur and digital ecosystem builder. He's the founder of School of Skills, which is a future school that aims to teach skills of the future to youth in emerging economies such as technology, storytelling, creativity, innovation, design thinking, emotional intelligence, soft skills, social consciousness, entrepreneurship, etc. Okay, welcome panelists. My name is Ramji Minwala. I'll be your moderator for today. There have been rapid changes, technological changes, social changes that have put many of the strategies, pedagogical techniques that we use in the classroom in doubt. We are moving towards an increasingly professionalized society where education has taken on a certain kind of value relative to the work that students will do once they graduate from schools and colleges, universities. And increasingly, we are told as educators that our students are ill-prepared to meet the challenges of the 21st century. So it is one of the central discussions I think that we need to have about how we do what we do in the classroom. And our panelists, I hope we will come up with some concrete strategies moving forward that can be implemented across school systems, both in Pakistan and globally, both at the primary, secondary, and tertiary levels, higher education, so that in fact we can give our students the skills they need to live productive and socially conscious lives as we move towards what seems to be a climate catastrophe in our near future. So, presenters. Dr. Burke, if you would start.
Okay, sure. So, assalamu alaikum, good morning, everyone. It is a topic of debate that we've been having for a very, very long time, and I think I always take my starting point for the future is always the past, yeah? And I'm not, in a sense, a futurist, and I wouldn't probably describe myself as somebody who has a specific vision. I'm probably more pragmatic when it comes to talk about the future of schooling and education generally. So what I wanted to do to start off with, I wanted to frame the discussion, I wanted to frame the discussion around an OECD report that came out of a meeting in Rotterdam in round about the year 2000. And why I think this is important is because the discussions and the debates on education generally and schooling specifically are not new, yeah? They've been around since we've had mass public schooling. And in every country and every national system, there's always ongoing debate and argument about how we should manage education generally and schooling very, very specifically. I think what's happened in today, particularly when we talk about 21st century, is there's often been this disconnect from the past And we see the 21st century as this century where we're beginning history, and it's the end of old history, and I'm not too sure about the efficacy and relevance of that. So basically, the OECD talk about 6 scenarios for the future of schooling, yeah, and they're just scenarios. They're probabilities with perhaps desirable outcomes. So the status quo basically is, the first 2 they call the status quo or the extrapolation of the current systems. Now I'm talking generally, I'm not talking about Pakistan specifically, but I'm talking generally globally. So they talk about robust bureaucratic school systems and strong bureaucracies basically that make up national school systems in most countries. And they say that these will quite possibly remain the same, or they won't change because there are powerful vested interests, government, politicians, and parents and students who want them to stay the same, or they have an inability to change because they don't have funding for it. And then the second one, extrapolating the current model, is the market-led education. Education through being driven by market demand, parents as consumers, for example. Now, models of these in the United States would be the charter schools, yeah. In Pakistan, they would be school systems like Beacon House City School. In countries like the UK, they would be the independent schools and some of the very old private schools, yeah. And they're market-driven. You go to them, you pay the money, and you want something from them. Then they talked about reschooling societies, and I think this is a really fascinating model, and I know that this is going to be covered in the discussion later. But the first model was, it looked at schools of the future as core social centres, yeah? Not only education, but actually taken on a much broader role as social centres where children and young people and university students learn about social issues, political issues, they engage in dialogue and discussion and the forefront of change within their societies. The second one talks about schools as very, very focused learning organisations. They are knowledge-based, they are learning centres, and they are not specifically just for learning a specific body of knowledge. Now, these 2 scenarios, reschooling, would require massive public funding. And so when you have countries spending 2%, 3%, 4% of their GDP on education, reschooling society in these models is really problematic. The last one, which I think is where you get this kind of big debate about technology, is we call it the deschooling of society. And the first idea is that schools, basically, we deschool societies, we don't have them as much as we have now, and they become learning networks. And you can learn anywhere you like because you have all your material and all your information online. And that, of course, means teachers, okay? If you're teachers here, okay, you better start looking for a new job, yeah? That's basically that model. And the last model, of course, is deschooling through teacher exodus. You know, we know that we're going to need something like 69 million teachers, I think, over the next 20-year period, particularly in the developing world. And in the West, when you look at educational reform in the United States and the market-driven education reform, which is trying to destroy teacher unions and good quality education for the poor, you're getting a mass teacher exodus from the system. If that were to happen globally and you have a mass teacher exodus, you don't have teachers wanting to work in schools, then you have a huge problem. And then you get sort of market-driven technology coming in and taking on. So they're basically the 6 scenarios that the OECD talk about. But just very quickly, I'll finish. They frame them within these 5 areas: attitude, expectations, political support, the goals and functions for schooling, organisation and structure, geopolitical dimensions, and the teaching profession. So it's a complex debate. It's not just what is the future of schooling. It is tied up politically and socially with our past and our present. Okay, thanks everybody. Okay, bye.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here. I will primarily talk about the use of technology in education and how that can be leveraged to have a quantum leap in the education landscape. So I'll just start by saying I'm an accidental educationist. 12 years ago, when I went to do an MBA, I realized that I had an intense curiosity to explore how applied research can have an impact in the socioeconomic status of societies. So needless to say, I pursued an academic qualification, and then years later, I had the opportunity to join the founding team at Khan Academy. The mission at Khan Academy was based on the premise that anyone can learn anything, and we set about to create content to cover K through 12, initially just math, but then pure sciences and other computer science, and then we reached the kind of scale that other credible content creators like British Museum, like NASA, like California Academy of Sciences, started approaching us and putting their content on our platform as well. Currently, I'm at Edmodo. Unlike Khan Academy, Edmodo doesn't have any content of its own. It's a K-12 social network which enables communication and collaboration. And we are in line with what is talked about as 21st century education. And you might ask, what is 21st century education? And I'll, if we can go to the next slide, yeah. These are the ingredients that are referred to in a 21st century education. You have the traditional notion of passive consumption of lectures or videos, which is what is being referred to in consumption. You have experimentation and learning through trial and error, which is correction. You have sort of Socrates-like interaction and persuasion, so that's what is being referred to in conversation. You have the proactive creation of content. You have thoughtful selection of both online and offline educational resources. That's what's being referred to in curation. And you also have play-based experimentation with pattern recognition, and that is what is being referred to in chaos. Edmodo is the largest K-12 platform in the world right now, and it has about 75 million users in pretty much every country of the world. There are about 76,000, actually 26,000 teachers, I'm sorry, in Pakistan, about 250,000 students, and more than 50% of the user base now is outside of the United States. So let me start by saying that we are living in unprecedented times. Khan Academy was a pioneer in creating content that was able to address a global audience, but now there's a plethora of other websites that have content addressing different subject matter. So you might be familiar with some of these sites. So now the challenge is more how to curate this content. There's a ton of content out there. How do you curate the content? How do you make it easier for the knowledge seeker to find the knowledge provider? And in addition to that, we have to decouple learning from assessment. I was happy to see that Pakistan now has a national testing service. So most of the higher education institutes accept this national testing service as a uniform standard to accept admissions for admissions purposes. Because when I was growing up in Pakistan, we had the only avenue to pursue higher education was to go through many different boards with varying degrees of quality associated with them. So it's good to see that there's like a uniform standard out there. And if you look at the United States, before World War II, most of the higher education institutes, particularly the better ones, were really, I would say, in the stranglehold of the elites. And the creation of the Educational Testing Service, ETS, and the Scholastic Aptitude Test played a major role in providing access to all segments of society to quality higher education institutes. So I think this is a positive step. If you want to read more about the creation of ETS and the impact it had on the US education system, this is a great book for that purposes. And Nicholas Lehman writes for the New Yorker. So we have this opportunity, and we have to face the fact that for most individuals, education is, and we have to align the incentives of the economic opportunity providers with those who are seeking economic opportunity. And it is actually in the interest of the private sector to have high quality educational institutes and have very robust evaluation standards. This is in partnership, so public-private partnership to create those evaluation standards. I mean, this is a portal that Indonesia has created to provide direction to learners to acquire content that are for high growth economic areas in Indonesia. So it behooves on the private sector to actually provide transparently and accurately areas where economic growth is happening. And I was happy to read actually recently that the government of Pakistan has entered into an agreement with Coursera to also identify content that is relevant for Pakistan's high growth areas. Then we have this opportunity how we can mobilize what I refer to as microeducation. And this can be done through thinking about education as a service, education as social entrepreneurship, and education as a marketplace. And what do I mean when I say that? Education as a service, you know, when I was growing up in Pakistan, I remember in intermediate, you got 20 marks if you did NCC, National Cadet Corps. So there can be many public or private sector initiatives to encourage young people to actually do something meaningful, to go out there and actually spread literacy, teach people how to read, write, teach them math, teach them programming, which are now essential skills in the global community. Now, what do I mean by education as social entrepreneurship? Really, we're in the realm right now where anybody who knows content, and that can be vetted, and knows how to use technology to manage a technology-oriented blended learning environment of varying comprehension levels should be able to, I mean, that's like a person who can go out there and teach individuals and should be able to get a loan to do that. So that's the model where you actually finance people to be social entrepreneur, this is the teacher entrepreneur model. And I was speaking to somebody who works at a microfinance bank, whether they would consider that to be collateral, whether if an individual has great grades at the university level and know how to use technology to teach students, whether that should be collateral enough for them to get a micro loan of $5,000 or 2.5 lakh ka, 5 lakh ka loan. You can get devices, access to technology, and also lesson plans, and platforms like Edmodo make it very easy to do that. And just to show you how easy it is to do that right now, I actually, for this panel today, I ended up creating a group which is out there. It's called School of Tomorrow 2017. I'll leave this flyer out here if you have time. Join me on this platform. It's just a group out there, and I've put resources, how easy it is to create a lesson plan. If you know whatever subject you know, it's very easy to create a lesson plan, grab whatever resources you want, Khan Academy, Coursera, whatever you want. If you think you know your subject matter, you can create a lesson plan, share it with others, and use it to teach others as well. So that's what I'm referring to in social entrepreneurship. And education as a marketplace is basically encouraging telecom companies to provide subsidized data packages for the same social entrepreneurs who teach. Then it's having testing services. Then it's like that national testing service should make it possible to track teachers who are doing a better job at teaching and so track their their success rates. So I'll just stop right there and just say that it's in the realm of the possible today to leverage technology and cause a quantum leap in the education landscape. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. First of all, I'll just say it's good to be back. I'm a Beaconite, and I've spent all my school years in Beacon House, and I was overwhelmed to see my class teacher from grade 2 welcoming me at the gate. All of us are here to talk about the future of schooling, how schools will be 40 to 50 years from now. But I think it's really important to put things into perspective by seeing how far we have come in the past 180 years since the advent of modern schooling in around 1837. So this is how schools used to look like when my parents went to school and perhaps their parents went to school. This is how school looked like when I went to school. And this is how most modern schools look like today. They have a very futuristic feel about them with iPads and smart boards and a lot of these technology integrations. But what hasn't changed across all these years is this notion of how we view the child. And what stays constant across all these depictions is the feeling that a child has to be taught, a child has to be told, a child will not be curious if left to his own devices. What I'm trying to say over here is that there is significant distrust that surrounds our schools even today. A.S. Neil, he's the father of alternate education, and he's once known to famously have said, "The aim of life is to find happiness, which means to find interest. Education should be a preparation for life. The advances of age are advances in mechanism, in communications and in computers, in science and in technology. New wars threaten, for the world's social conscience is still primitive." When we talk about future, we talk about it in terms of technology, gadgets, apps, systems, jobs, careers, all of which is really, really important. But when we're talking about future with perspective to raising kids, what really needs to be more important, what really needs to be talked about is how neurotic the world is becoming and how we need to develop and strengthen the cognitive, social, and emotional grit of these children. Because if we're not doing that, then we're not innovating. We're just digitalizing traditional teaching, and this is something that most visionaries don't intend to do. So what we need to do is we need to revisit this question of how we view the child and ask ourselves if we're asking the right questions. We need to ask ourselves, when we look at this child, we need to ask, what does he want? What does he need? How does he want to learn? What does he want to know? To what extent should I dictate his life? Should I actually trust the decisions that he's making? And all to what end? So it is not the buildings, it's not the infrastructure that has to change first. It's the mindset of the parents, of the teachers, of the educationists, the governments, all stakeholders involved in the discussion. So that takes us to the next question of what is future of teaching then? Dr. Burke talked about reschooling, and then he talked about another model where he also talked about deschooling. I talk about unschooling, where we sort of come up with a hybrid between reschooling and deschooling. Any job that cannot be automated is not a job of the future, no doubt about that. But then there is one job that will never be automated, and that is the human bond. So from how I see it, teachers have to be curators of this human bond. They have to be people who can converse with the children, who can listen to what the children have to say. They have a very important emotional and formative role to play in the lives of all these children. And I feel, and again referring back to what Dr. Burke said, in order to progress further, we have to be very aware of our roots. I derive a lot of comfort from the schoolhouse model of the past, where there used to be these buildings in villages and towns where children used to go to get education. These places were transdisciplinary and they were multi-aged. And the predominant medium of learning used to be experience and discourse. And the predominant the predominant relationship used to be that of a student and a mentor, the Ustad-Shagird relationship. So building on that and interweaving it with the demands of the fast-changing world of today, I have tried to develop a system which is a community-based model of learning. We leverage on technology to allow children to learn at their own pace using adaptive learning. Then we give children enough time and space during the day to make choices, to design their own timetables according to their own needs and based on what they want to learn. We have a system of democratic education. So we have democracy in school where children make the rules for the school and they have this feeling that we are the ones who are empowered. And lastly, children have this need to feel safe. So adults are obviously there in the system, but not as teachers, as mentors. They are the people who guide the decision-making process of the children. And this is what our community looks like today. We started off with around 18 children in 2014, and over a course of 3 years, alhamdulillah, now we have around 130 students at the Idopian community. Lastly, I'll say that on our website, there is this quotation which says, it's a quotation by Peter H. Johnston. It says, "If nothing else, children should leave school with the sense that if they act and act strategically, they can accomplish their goals." We cannot predict the future, but we can definitely change the emphasis to things that matter more. And I feel that we really, really need to come up with systems that would allow children to take a charge of their own lives, that will allow them to learn independently and know the value of their own voice. From how I see it, children who know how to design their own path will be the children who would be able to embrace future as an exciting adventure rather than a taxing journey. Thank you.
Saad Hamid sir.
Great. So I'm going to talk about a small subset of schooling, which is in the future, I'm hoping will become a very integral part of how you look at schools and how you look at kids and the young people, and which is skills. And because I believe, I've gone through that system where I've been a part of local schools, but I've not gone through any A levels or O levels. I went through I went through metric and FSC, which is what most of Pakistan goes through. And at that level, when kids are going through that system, one of the things that they are not able to learn or through any other system is the skills, because the future is all about skills. And I might be making this assumption, but when you look at the world of how the world is evolving in terms of technology and what progress it is making, things are going to be more or less about skills. And when you look at skills, you can look at some of the skills that students require for the 21st century. And my focus is a little bit on the digital skills. And why is that? Because technology is going to play a very, very important role in the school of the future. And why is that? Because experts predict that 90% of entire population will be connected within 10 years. And what does that mean? What that means for Pakistan is that any school, whether in Gujarat or Gujranwala, or any of the third or four-tiered cities, will have the same access to knowledge, will have the same access to technology and content that some of the best schools has. And the thing that we need to realize is that what exactly are we doing with access to this technology, which is why I have a lot of questions for you rather than answers. So one of the research is actually done by Mozilla Foundation with some of the schools in some of the developing countries, shows some really interesting stats, which I'm going to share with you if the clicker works. So what they realized is that in most of the ways how the kids use the internet, either through their phone or through their laptops, does not ever cross the first degree, which is communication. So these kids know how to connect with each other. These kids know how to send messages, and which is like a very basic form of literacy, right? You know how to talk to someone. And they know how to share, they know how to compose, but they're missing out on these very integral components which will define how they perform in their future life. And that components are creativity, that components are collaboration, and that components are problem solving. And if you really want to try this in Pakistan, and I could do this experiment right now in this room, that the kids in this room, you ask them to open up a phone and, say, hey, beta, can you send a message to that khala of yours? So that kid would know that, that he's supposed to go to Facebook through his mother's or dad's account and is supposed to message the khala. But when you ask this kid, hey, can you find out if this particular news about President Trump is fake or not? That's where the kid will not be able to solve the problem, because the way they're using technology was not in a way that they were able to solve problems. And that's one of the major areas where I think schooling needs to go towards, that you have technology in your rooms, which is pretty cool, amazing, but now you need to solve problems with that. And how do you do that? And one of the, you can see that there are different areas here. Why is it that in Pakistan, we don't get to see a technologist like Steve Jobs or Bill Gates? We keep talking about this, but we don't get to see that. It's because we have made our kids very passive, and we have not made them makers. So the school of the future is a school of makers. A school of the future is a school of people who can either code or who can, or probably not code, but build something amazing. And we don't probably have the builder's mindset, which is why we never get to see any of the very amazing entrepreneurs or startups coming out of Pakistan through our educational system. And this brings us to this, which we call as digital intelligence, or DQ, which is going to be a very integral part of schools going in the future. I hope it is, because this teaches the kids about, as much as about what they're supposed to do, but also about what they're not supposed to do. And there are different quadrants to this. There is this thing about digital use. And again, if you do these experiments, you'll see the actual use of this. So you'll see my 3-year-old daughter, who's in this room here somewhere, has a habit of using YouTube and going through a bunch of videos. But how do I instill this ability in that 3-year-old? Hey, these are the videos you're supposed to watch, and these are the videos that you're not supposed to watch. And I could again make use of technology and use probably the YouTube Kids app. But at the same time, it's an ability that we have to kind of think at a very early stage. So it also kind of brings us to that concept of homeschooling, that homeschooling is more important than ever. We can no longer rely on just the schools, because most of the time when the kids are at home, they have access to technology and technological content. So how are we kind of, creating that barrier where the kids are not able to access the content that I hope that they don't? So again, the point is that a school of the future is a school of skills, and a school of the future is a school for everyone. A school of the future is not just a school for the people who are sitting in this room or who are living in Islamabad, Lahore, and Karachi. A school of the future is a school which offers content and knowledge to everyone, no matter where they are. And a school of future is also a school of design thinking, because we need to kind of again believe that at the school level, how are we thinking to make the kids into design thinkers so they can actually create or build things later on. And I also believe that a school of the future is a school of leadership, because again we are trying to learning and development is there, but at the same time one of the very integral parts of that is how do these kids when they progress through the learning and development phase turn into leaders. A school of the future is also a school of innovation. which is something that I never get to, I get to hear this a lot, by the way, at a lot of the discussions in Pakistan. I never get to see this practiced. There are no case studies of this, not even a single case study. Probably there is that I have not come across, but we keep talking a lot about innovation and even another buzzword that we call as entrepreneurship. But again, I would be very much interested to kind of find out that how are we actually creating that school for the young people, which teaches them to create their own things, probably create their own businesses, and not conform to the world and go on and join a job. So for me, a school of the future is probably a school in the cloud, which is a concept which was pioneered by Sugata Mitra, tested all around the world. Again, I've not seen many experiments around this in Pakistan, would love to try something out, but I see teachers playing a very a facilitative role in the school of the future rather than a very authoritative role in the classroom. It's more of becoming like it's responsibility and an opportunity for the kids to learn what they want to learn as opposed to what the teachers are teaching them. Sorry. And this is something that I've been working on with TED Ed. It's a model that we have kind of designed for a kind of a school of the future, and this is more targeted towards the young people. So we think in a perfect world, the young people aged from 14 to 22, who are in that exact age where they need to kind of learn the skills of the future, we hope that they would have these 3 skills, which is digital thinking, which is emotional intelligence, and which is social consciousness. And again, the thing is that we keep talking about this stuff, but we don't actually see this being practiced. The young people that are kind of graduating from different colleges or even universities need to have an access to all of this knowledge base or this content to be able to fit into the world of the future, which is a very digital world. And why I say this is because, again, there's a quote by Steve Jobs, which is one of my favorite, is that technology alone is not enough. It's technology married with liberal arts, married with humanities that yields us the results that make our hearts sink. And so far, again, I think there's a lack in schools in kind of bringing all these components together. There's actually another slide, which is about a program that I'm about to launch, which is called SKIP. So SKIP is School Kids Innovation Program. We again believe that the current schools, if they adopt this model of bringing technology and humanities and liberal arts together, they'll be able to create kids who can create amazing things in the future. And that's why we're launching this program for kids, which is a program which is at the heart of digital thinking, social consciousness, and emotional intelligence. And that's what I hope that people take this particular thing from this session, and that is about teaching how their kids are able to learn the skills of the future. And we don't know what those skills are, but we know that this current schooling systems that we have in place need to adopt a lot of that to be able to get their kids ready for the skills of the future or for the future in general. If anyone is interested in being a part of this program or helping me out, I would love to do that. But that's my hope, that we have a future which is a future of skills, not just, again, for Islamabad, Lahore, and Karachi, but for everyone. Thank you.
So if I can quickly summarize, Dr. Burke actually suggested that there are 6 different models moving forward, 2 that would sustain the status quo, 2 that would engage in what I would refer to as reschooling, which would overhaul the systems that exist, and then deschooling, in which technology would take the space of teachers and would reformat or refunction schools in those ways. Bilal Musharraf Saab talked about an education that focused on the needs of the future, sort of market-driven entrepreneurial needs of the future, where the education would actually look at 6 different areas: consumption, correction, conversation, creation, curation, and play-based chaos. And that the coming together of these different elements will create or will develop a student to face the many challenges of the future, and that the combinations of these, which include actually many of the skills that actually have been talked about by our 2 other panelists as well, issues related to collaboration, creation of content, curation. Javeria Sethi discussed unschooling in order to develop learning communities, and learning communities that look more like the schoolhouse of the past, where students were able to collaborate and work together in order to arrive at common solutions to challenges. Hamid Saab had discussed the coming together of social consciousness, digital thinking, and the liberal arts in order to create both a sensibility about the digital future for our students, a learning about the digital future for our students, coupled with older understandings of the liberal arts and sciences that develop critical thinking and communication skills, and hopefully a social consciousness where we understand that the social world itself needs changing, and we work towards bettering that social world for our individual communities. Yes, was that fair enough?
Thank you, yeah.
Yeah. So I have a question, and this is, if in fact, so many of these, except perhaps Ms. Sethi's learning communities, many of the models that you have suggested involve technology, and that in fact the sort of insertion of technology into the learning space, which has happened across the board, to varying levels of effect, I would say. Though not so much in Pakistan. The majority of schools in Pakistan, I would say, are technology-less, that they don't have access to technology. How would you transform, well, firstly, what happens in a school that does not have that capability or does not have that access? Because so much of what you both, or 3 of you have said, in fact, relies on the use of technology. And perhaps Ms. Sethi was also talk to this issue. And what happens when, in fact, technology, we begin to rely on technology to the extent that the interaction of students with students or students with instructors in a learning community completely disappears? Because I think those are dangers, and I think those are dangers that we need to address.
Yeah, can I respond to that? Yeah. Because, okay, firstly, you know, what I find really irritating about debates about the future of schooling and the use of technology is they're often based on a profound ignorance of the history of education, yeah? And so to suggest that there's never been creativity or innovation or skills or collaboration in education over the last 100-odd years or whatever is an absolute myth. It is just not true. How many of you saw that beautiful mime yesterday? How many of you saw that beautiful mime? What a great example of skill, collaboration, creativity. It was absolutely amazing. That kind of learning has been going on for 200-300 years, yeah? And so, you know, John Dewey, he developed the concept of experiential learning. He wrote a wonderful book, Education and Democracy, 1913 it was, he wrote it. And he talked about learning by doing and PBL. He talked about innovation. He talked about getting out into communities and learning through experience and so on and so forth. So, you know, what really irritates me is that technology, in a sense, is attempting to drive education without any understanding of the history of learning or the history of the great people who have brought us education, Piaget, Vygotsky, Dewey, and so on and so forth. And, you know, to suggest that every child is going to be down the back of their garage becoming an innovator is absolutely absurd. You know, there are things that we still have to do in terms of education, literacy, numeracy. And I think, as my colleague at the end pointed out, one of the most important things in her school is that it's not so much about education, it's more about living and learning and children relating with one another. And to be quite frank, schools can survive without technology. Yeah, the power goes off. Whoop, what are we going to do? We're going to talk to one another. Yeah, I mean, and so being dependent on technology and arguing that without it, we're not educating successfully in the 21st century, I think is a lie. I don't think it's true at all. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'd like to respond to that. So we have to face reality. It's not about really replacing the role of the teacher. It's about augmenting the role, and the teacher should be at the front and center of how engagement and education ought to be delivered. I mean, I'm all for the government and public sector taking on the responsibility of guaranteeing every child up to high school level a high quality education. But until we get there, we've got a population of under 13-year-olds that form the majority of this population. So we don't have the capacity to meet that gap. And we have an issue of not having enough schools, not having enough qualified teachers, and fortunately, for the majority part, teaching as a profession in this ecosystem is a profession of last resort. You're not getting the best folks to go into the teaching profession, unlike Finland or unlike Korea or unlike Singapore. That's not happening right now. So how do you mobilize people? How do you get people who actually have a love of the subject to go out there and teach? You do that through, you have to fix the incentives for them to go out there, and you bypass the bottlenecks in infrastructure by incentivizing them, and that's why the entrepreneurial model comes in, where the teacher has they become schools in and of themselves, and they go in and plug themselves into communities, and we did that at Khan Academy, where it's possible to go out there and plug yourself into a community and find out where the gaps in comprehension exist, and bring in an entire community up to a certain level of comprehension. And I agree it's a stopgap measure. It's not the ideal, but we don't have the luxury of putting it off for another decade. We don't.
So you're talking specifically in a Pakistan context, yes. Is that correct? Yeah.
That is correct.
Okay, so I think it's really important to delineate that, because I think I was talking sort of very generally globally, but I would have to say to you, the 8,000 teachers we have in Beacon House are there because they love their job. I met and I spoke to 6,000 of them at the start of the school year in small groups, and I never met any of them who were discontented with their role as teachers. They loved the work they do. And I think we have to be really careful about assumptions about why people become teachers, and particularly in Pakistan, even in the public sector. So I don't know if it's a last resort job. Perhaps it's something that people in the audience might want to sort of comment on. Yeah.
Technologies? It's actually one of the central questions that has been asked repeatedly in this stack that I have. It's about the role of technology.
So I think very much similar to what Bilal said. He kind of stole the word which is from my mouth, which is exactly about augmenting. So it's not like the way I believe technology, again, based on the little research that I've done. Technology can always come in to augment the current systems that are already there, and it will just accelerate the process of learning. That's all the argument that I'm trying to make. And I saw this recently. This is a personal incident which was really moving. That we went to a school in the outskirts of Islamabad. You guys have probably heard of it. It's called Mashal School. It's a school for low-income communities, right? So the kids who are learning there in that school, the average income of their parents is around 4,000 to 5,000 rupees per month. And you would never expect these people to have access to technology or even use technology. And then in the classroom when we were out there, we asked that, hey, do any of you actually use Facebook? And they were like, no, we don't even know what that is. And which was okay. So we tried to turn that around a little bit, and we started distributing them and asking the same question individually and in small groups. And we actually found out that actually 60% of the class had access to technology already. And then we used to ask them that, what do you do on this? And they were like, just, chat with friends, or, our family who is abroad, or access YouTube. What do you watch on YouTube? Indian channels, we love them. Those are amazing. Good. So now the thing is, in technology, we have these three paradigms: access, affordability, awareness. I don't need to work on the affordability. I don't need to work on the access. I just need to work on the awareness. And that's where the whole, the discussion changes, because now we were thinking, can we give them opportunities to learn through something that they already have access to? And that's why I think technology is just an enabler. It just helps accelerate the process of learning. You could have schools where there's no technology. That's totally fine. You could go on like this for the next 1,000 years. That's totally fine. But if you were to do that, you were to create beautiful communities of learners, which now do not only connect with each other, but connect with learners around the world. One very good example is TED-Ed, which is a very big learning community around the world which has done that. Yeah.
Building on that point, when technology is being used as an accelerator, I just want to caution everyone that when we are using technology as an accelerator, we need to be aware of aboutitis, which is a disease pointed out by David Perkins in most of his talks at Harvard, where if we do not revisit what we are transmitting through that technology, then we will be sending out a lot of redundant content and a lot of redundant information at a faster pace. And this is not what we intend to do with technology. So yes, we do have technology at our school as well. We use it in a very enabling fashion. So what we really need to figure out is what is more enabling and what is just, using technology to deliver the same curriculum at the faster pace would not help. Yeah.
Fair enough. There are many questions actually. There's a question actually for you, Ms. Sethi. To what extent should the willingness of the learner be catered to? Because ultimately, the degrees and the grades that they receive are social requirements. So there are actually a number of questions about assessments and grades and the context in which your school specifically seems to suggest that there are no forms of assessment or no grades. So could you speak to that?
Yeah, I feel to the greatest extent possible, because we really need to tell the children how much the social expectations matter in the end, because in the end it's the human being, your own self, your ego, and your own personal goals that sort of supersede what people want to see you doing. So I feel, yes, the grades are there, the social measures of assessment are there, but in the end, if a child who has been told how to make decisions very early on in life, then I don't think that child will be very intimidated by society even in the longer run. That being said, we're not saying that a school should not encourage learning, but at the same time, we don't want grades to be the reason why a child wants to learn, that they should be a byproduct of the learning. They should not be the goal of the learning. So yes.
So what do you mean by design thinking? If you could elaborate on that.
Sure. So it's not a new concept. It just has kind of caught the wind right now in Pakistan. So it's kind of becoming like a pop culture thing. But design thinking to me, design thinking in itself is just about finding the needs of the user and creating a solution. And it's basically, it comes from a philosophy which is known as the maker philosophy. And my issue with our schooling system right now is that I just don't, at the end of the day, when we go out, probably I'm not aware of it, but we just don't see that level of innovation going on in schools that is probably going on in some other parts of the world. And to do that, I think it's not to replace the current system and introduce a kind of a curriculum which does not conform to how the country works. But at the same time, introduce some new things which will help our students and our learners and our kids become makers. My question is, why can't an 11-year-old build apps? Because I know 11-year-olds who build apps. They don't go to some of the best schools in Pakistan. They're able to control the Alexas and the Siris of their home. So if everything is going towards technology, it's probably not everyone needs to build apps, but at least some people need to do. And it's not even just about apps, right? It's about understanding that you have the knowledge, you have the content, what you can build to create a better Pakistan. How many of the solutions that you have seen for Pakistan have come out of Pakistan?
Can I? Okay. You know, I think those kind of aspirations, I think, are incredibly admirable. And I think, you know, I'm familiar with design thinking and making and so forth. But here's the point I want to make about education, yeah? To develop an app requires great skill, requires a mathematical understanding. They're based on algorithms. It requires a process of teaching and learning, yeah? So once you've done that, and you give children, yes, and they can, there have been some as young as 11 and so forth, the ability to create your own apps. They create an app. So how many 11, 12-year-olds are there in Pakistan? How many are there globally? You can't have millions and millions of children sitting down and creating apps, yeah? So what I'm trying to point out with, whilst there are great opportunities in technology for creativity and innovation, there is still a huge need for education in the foundations of literacy and content knowledge, not at the behest of skill, but as part of it with skill, because content knowledge and skill go together, yeah, and that will provide sound schooling and education for the future. It's just kind of like there's often this disconnect, and I think it's very important that we reconnect with the purpose of education. You know, the domains of learning, cognitive, affective, psychomotor, they're incredibly important still, yeah? And it's making that connection with them again, yeah?
I'm told that we actually have to wrap up, and we have time for one more question. So what solutions in the School of Tomorrow, especially using technologies, would you use to engage the disengaged and the trackless students in a classroom, especially since technologies often distance and alienate students as opposed to including them in communities of learning? So. Yes, what solutions or techniques would you use to engage students who are generally disengaged or who don't have interest or don't seem to have interest or purpose, especially using technologies, given that technologies themselves tend to alienate when one doesn't know how to use them, or one is not comfortable with the use of technology in the classroom. So.
Beacon House, yes. I just want to say this, Beacon House embraces technologies, and we have some fantastic technologies. We use them to enhance teaching and learning. So they're never ever used in a way that would alienate or marginalize children, yeah? We've got real perspective on how to manage it, basically. And we do those things. We use it for tracking, we use it for, if you were, yesterday you saw our app, yeah, so it's great. So we use it in a very balanced and informed way, yeah, thanks.
So one of my favorite quotes is, "The limits of my knowledge are the limits of my the limits of my language are the limits of my knowledge." I think one of the two. And so literacy is a major challenge. I think the best thing we can do is to teach people how to read and write and have a love of learning. And because where the skills we can teach, I mean, these are all vocational things. I think programming is actually easy to teach. But what is hard to teach is divergent thought process, like nurture discovery-based learning, and having a constructivist view, protecting that, nurturing that. That is harder to do. That's what I think, Javeria, you spoke to as well. And there are examples of like Duolingo and other, which are very play-based, which help you like learn languages, and I think that opens a window into a world for you.
So I think we need to wrap up. I would like to leave the panel with one short quote, so which in a sense might put this into context in a strange and different way. 100 years ago, Robert Frost gave a lecture at Amherst College, and the lecture is titled actually Education by Poetry. And his argument in the lecture is that the only education worth having is actually an education by poetry, because by reading poetry, one learns what one ought to learn at school, which is judgment and taste, in the broadest possible ways, defining judgment and taste, to be able to judge and to be able to assess, which is what taste really is. And I think all of us have, all our panelists have suggested ways in which we could achieve moving towards those two things. But it frames it perhaps slightly differently, so. And why poetry is important.
Thank you so much.